we're back in the car on a Monday like we never left. I'm going to skip the opening here because I kind of want to get right to it. Yesterday was Clint Eastwood's 96th birthday, and his son announced, I don't know if he announced on his social media, but his son basically said that his father is retired, that he's not actively working on anything, and I guess we are to believe that that's it. Now, the man is 96. He has had, I believe, the single greatest career in the history of Hollywood when you take into account the fact that he was a matinee idol movie star, a bankable star. He was world's box office #1 for a number of years, and he has won 4 Oscars as producer and director. You can't really do any better, and you can't do any more in the business. But having said that, with the understanding that time catches up to everyone, even Clint Eastwood, it's a little sad. It's more than a little sad. But I remember when he made The Mule and me thinking, well, that's it for him. He's not going to work anymore after that. And he ended up making 2 films after The Mule. Actually 3. He did the Richard Jewell film, which he just directed and didn't star in. And then he did Cry Macho, which was really not that good, unfortunately. And Juror Number 2, which was a very, very solid film. But when I read the quotes by Scott, that's the, if you don't know the name offhand, that's the son that looks a lot like him. His eldest son, Kyle. I mean, Kyle kind of looks more like his first wife, who was Margaret or Maggie. But I was depressed. I almost didn't think that I was so stupid. I didn't think that I was going to be able to record an episode because I was really down and just not feeling good about it. It's like, it's not that you want to get a terrible announcement or news that somebody has died, but it's the finality of understanding that there will not ever be any more Clint Eastwood movies. And as somebody who took control of his career in the late 1960s when he famously formed Malpaso Productions, and Malpaso Productions up to and through 2024's aforementioned Juror Number 2, there have been offices on the Warner Brothers lot since the late 1960s. And his first film as director, of course, 1971's Play Misty for Me, where he stars in the film with his buddy and frequent collaborator, the filmmaker Don Siegel. And it was Don Siegel, the man who directed Invasion of the Body Snatchers, not the 1970s one, but the 1956 with Kevin McCarthy. Just a tremendous, tremendous movie. One of the best science fiction films, in my opinion, ever made. And I love the 78 version with Donald Sutherland, Leonard Nimoy, Jeff Goldblum, very young Jeff Goldblum. But the original is, in my opinion, still the best. But Don Siegel was the one who talked Clint Eastwood into applying for his Directors Guild card. And he is the one who was convinced, not so much that he convinced Clint, but Don Siegel, a great filmmaker, a kind of second-tier master filmmaker, he was convinced that Clint could be a good filmmaker, and he ended up being more right than he could have possibly known. And so going back to Play Misty for Me, Clint balanced movies where he just acted, and as he got older, it was more that he was actor-director, but he balanced films where he just acted and directed and acted, and then occasionally just directed, like the 1973 film with Kay Lenz and the brilliant William Holden called Breezy, which is like a kind of an old school romantic movie about a May-December romance, a very young woman and a guy who, you know, William Holden unfortunately didn't age particularly well. William Holden always looked older than his actual age. In the movie Breezy, he's probably like 50, and he looks like a senior citizen to my eyes. But that's neither here nor there. Clint always showed that ability to see things and to, in many cases, turn straw into gold. Because there are good movies in his filmography where if you just looked at the script or the story, you wouldn't have expected them to be as effective as they were. He just had a gift. He knew how to get the most out of his actors. And, you know, many people who have worked with him talk about the fact that he famously would only do a couple of takes and wasn't interested in keeping the crew, you know, standing around doing nothing all day. For somebody who had incredible patience Because in order to be a performer, to work in Hollywood, I don't care who you are, you have to have incredible amounts of patience. Because you might be sitting in your trailer the whole fucking day and doing nothing, and you can't lose your mind. You can't go stir crazy. You have to stay calm and focused. But for somebody with incredible patience, he didn't like to screw around when he was making the film. 2 takes maximum. Right up on through juror number 2, what's her name, Toni Collette, who plays a key role of a district attorney in that film, or an attorney who's trying to become district attorney would be more accurate, that he just doesn't screw around. Everything's got to be in there, and he doesn't want people standing around doing nothing if they don't have to. Basically, if everybody had the Clint Eastwood mindset, I feel like movies would come in cheaper and they would not take as much time. Special effects being something else. I mean, movies that are not effects heavy, because when you're dealing with CGI and even very heavy practical effects, model work, miniatures, etc., then it's going to be different. But virtually every movie that Clint Eastwood produced and or directed under the imprimatur of Malpaso Productions, 95% of them came in on time and under budget. And that is something that just doesn't happen in Hollywood. But it's part of how he worked and how diligent he was and how focused he was, and staying with his process, which is, just don't like doing a lot of takes. When I hire, this would be him speaking, when I hire someone like Matt Damon to work for me, or Morgan, or a Gene Hackman, they don't need a lot of takes. They're professionals, and they're going to give you a good piece of acting on the first couple of takes. There's no need to sit there. And Clint never ragged on anybody else. He wasn't at post-haste saying, yeah, Stanley Kubrick sucked, or I never would have worked for him. But this was just how he did his job. He wanted to get in and get out and not spend too much time on an individual setup. Always quick. Keep it moving. And juror number 2 was an easier shoot because, with COVID had died down and things were, it's easy for me to say that things had gotten back to normal by 2022, 2023, but it certainly was a lot better than when Clint shot Cry Macho during COVID. And with all of the stuff that could have conceivably gone wrong with the production because of COVID and the fears of, one guy gets sick and then we have to shut it down. Remember Tom Cruise famously getting frustrated with some of the crew members on Mission Impossible. I think it was part 1. It's a real thing that if you had one crew member test positive for COVID, they were fucked. They were going to have to shut everything down. But nobody got sick on the set of Cry Macho, and that film came in on time and under budget. And, I've talked about him by far more than any other individual in Hollywood, even Spielberg or Arnold or Stallone, some of the other people I love. But Clint Eastwood, 96 yesterday, born May 31st, 1930 in San Francisco. He is my single favorite person to ever work in the movie business. Someone whose films have did evolve, and you can easily chart courses that the Clint Eastwood of a certain movie would not have made, a later movie, and that the Clint Eastwood, like in his 70s, is not making, like if he were making High Plains Drifter, he would not have made the film the same. He would have made it differently, because he did evolve, and his thought process and the way that he viewed the world, the way that he viewed the United States, the way that he viewed the criminal justice system. Honestly, juror number 2 is it takes a very pessimistic view of the criminal justice system. There have been other films in Clint's filmography that share a similar pessimism, but there have also been films that strike a more hopeful tone. You look at Space Cowboys from 2000 and how upbeat, even though that movie is not really what you would think of as a crowd pleaser, it really has a lot of crowd pleasing, elements to it. And I guess if I'm asked, what do I think is the most entertaining film that he has made since 2000? Because $1 Million Baby, he's not making any larger points on society. That movie is fucking brutal. And I understand it won the Oscar and he won Best Director and the critics hit the ceiling. Great performances across the board. Morgan and obviously Hilary Swank and Clint himself, just terrific. That's a very depressing movie. What he did with Gran Torino, though, which is kind of his last big movie star kind of role, even as old as he was. I feel like the character of Walt Kowalski was almost a little bit older, because Clint was in his late 70s at the time. It almost feels like that guy should be in his 80s, you know? But that's a movie that has a very upbeat message. And it's a message of peace and reconciliation in that particular film. It has nothing to do with the the criminal justice system in a cockeyed way. If 50 people see gangbangers commit a murder, somebody's going to testify. How about that, right? We could get into that. But Gran Torino is not a movie that younger Clint would have made. That material would not have been interesting to him in the 70s when he was making films like The Eiger Sanction, The Gauntlet, as I say, High Plains Drifter, and probably not even in the early 80s, Firefox. And Clint was not a guy who followed trends. He did his own thing. He charted out his own career path. When they told him he couldn't do comedies, he did Right Turn, Clyde, Every Which Way But Loose, and Any Which Way You Can. And Every Which Way But Loose, here's a little trivia. Biggest box office hit of the year, Superman, the original, the OG with Christopher Reeve, which obviously I've talked about frequently on this channel. The number 2 biggest box office hit, Every Which Way But Loose, the first film in the 2-film series of Clint Eastwood playing a bare-knuckle fighter named Philo Beto. People said he couldn't do that, he did it. One of the rare times where he seemed to have the pulse of Hollywood and he made a movie in the ballpark of what he thought people wanted at the time was a 1982 film, Firefox, which was a kind of modest box office hit, but not as big of a hit as you would have expected from Clint. And it was released during that unbelievably stacked summer of 1982 with E.T., with Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, with John Carpenter's The Thing, with other movies. And, Spielberg's E.T. was the biggest box office hit of the year. But that was a great movie year with Tootsie and Gandhi and other big movies. But Firefox was a science fiction film. That is Clint's only foray. I don't know if you would call Space Cowboys a sci-fi film. That would be a stretch. But maybe that's considered sci-fi. It's more of an adventure story with science fiction elements. But Firefox is pure sci-fi. And in that era, sci-fi was king. The OG Star Wars, Episode 4 it's called now, was 5 years prior. Empire Strikes Back 2 years prior. And you had Battlestar Galactica on TV. You had Star Trek the Motion Picture in 79 and Star Trek The Wrath of Khan coming out when Firefox, right around within a week really of Firefox. Oh, of course, Blade Runner, duh. The biggest one of them all, and a box office bomb, unlike Firefox, which did turn a profit. Blade Runner did not. It was too cerebral, too intellectual, and people, if they were going to see sci-fi, they were more likely to go see E.T. for the second, third, and fourth times, and possibly Clint in Firefox. But other than that, he was an American original. There was nothing about him that was inauthentic. He really did his own thing and made movies the way he wanted to. And if he said, I can do it on such and such a budget, he did it on such and such a budget. And you look at Unforgiven, which is a very expensive looking film. And even that movie, a difficult shoot, mostly in Alberta, Canada, kind of standing in for the American West, with all those big actors. And Sir Richard Harris, the future Albus Dumbledore 8 years later, the first Albus Dumbledore, and Morgan and Jean and himself. That was not an easy shoot, and they managed to get that film in way under budget and on time, and he was able to get it ready early enough so that he would then get cast in The Line of Fire at a point in time where it looked like his days as a leading man were over. Nobody will ever have a back nine, to use a golf term. Clint was a big golfer. A back nine resurgence in his career like Eastwood, where at age 60 it seemed, all right, he had a great run. He's a living legend already. He's made some, Oscar-level type movies. Hadn't been nominated for Best Director or Best Actor yet. But Unforgiven immediately put him on the A-list, and the strength of an early cut of Unforgiven got him in The Line of Fire. A pivotal film, and I would say the single best performance of his career. Many people will say Unforgiven, but I think what he does in The Line of Fire is even more impressive. I think the character that he plays, the kind of haunted Secret Service agent Frank Horrigan, it's just beautiful work. And it's the only movie in his filmography that specifically trades on who he was at that time. The fact that he's playing a character who is a living legend in the Secret Service. Hey, bro, Clint Eastwood was already a living legend at age 62 and 63. And the film kind of straddles the reality and the real, the real versus real, where you're watching a legendary name play this kind of role, an action hero role, a Dirty Harry-esque kind of role for the last time, because he was getting too old already, and that's written into the story. Harry Callahan would have had a better chance of solving that problem quicker than Frank Horrigan. The 40-year-old Harry Callahan against an elite assassin. I don't think the elite assassin is fucking with him in the same way. If he wants to take him out, just going to try to kill him. But that's a fantastic movie and performance, and a swan song for the first generation as far as the old school action hero jumping across buildings kind of stuff. But so many great movies after Unforgiven. A Perfect World, I think, is almost a masterpiece. Bridges of Madison County, an incredible adaptation of not a good book. I'm sorry. Bridges of Madison County, like 50 Shades, sold a ton of copies. It's not good. It's not good. I'm sorry, it is not good. No, I'm not sorry, it's not good, period. The movie is fantastic. Clint sells it, and he holds his own with Meryl, which is an achievement in and of itself. Meryl Streep could have won the Oscar that year. That's how good she was. I think her work is as good as Susan Sarandon in Dead Man Walking, but that was the deserving winner. But Meryl was tremendous. And, the movie he did in 99, True Crime, I don't love it. But I do love 1997's Absolute Power, the adaptation of David Baldacci's runaway best-selling novel. And, Clint's real name is Clinton. He was born Clinton Eastwood Jr. And Absolute Power was a movie that when it was coming out, there were a lot of critics that asked, is this a treatise on the President of the United States at the time, Bill Clinton? And Clinton Eastwood said, no, this is not a Bill Clinton story. It's really not. The character that Gene plays is not supposed to be Clinton. But he had a laugh, and a lot of people found, some humor in that. There were a number of films in that era where the President of the United States is represented. Morgan Freeman in Deep Impact. Kevin Kline, of course, famously in Ivan Reitman's Dave. And, it's always difficult. Michael Douglas in The American President plays the president. In all of those movies, there were critics that pointed to whoever the president was. Well, this guy, in the movie Dave, they said how William Harrison Mitchell was supposed to be like a George W., or actually at the time, an H.W. Bush kind of a president. And it's not always a criticism, it's just an observation. But Absolute Power is a great film, which did well at the box office, but I feel like it's a little bit underrated historically. The cast is just so tremendous. Ed Harris in there, Dennis Haysbert, Scott Glenn, Judy Davis. Just amazing. But it's like you run out of words. You don't even know what to say when you have a career like that. Number of box office hits, the amount of money that he made for Warner Brothers over the years. It's almost incalculable. His worth and his value and what he has meant to the movie business as a whole in his quiet, loner, taciturn kind of way. And, this is really all I wanted to say, that I am sad that he has called it a career. I thought that I'm just pathetic. I thought that I might tear up a little bit during this episode, but I'm feeling a little bit better about it now, I guess. It's time. And the fact that he was able to direct a film as he was age 94 and make a really good movie, 88-89% on Rotten Tomatoes, juror number 2. Even though WB and Zaslav, I don't know what they were doing, they messed up the release. They only released it in like 300 theaters in the whole United States, so the box office wasn't that good. But I guess Zaslav's plan was, well, we're gonna do well. We're gonna get some new business with people subscribing to HBO Max to watch this movie, I guess. But yeah, Clint Eastwood, 96 years old yesterday, and now if you Google his Wikipedia page, this was what got me. It says retired American actor, producer, and director. And I guess I was just hoping that he was going to keep going. Robert Altman was planning movies when he passed. And Clint, from what Scott said, he's doing okay. He's still living, his normal life. They even said he still plays golf occasionally, which is fucking crazy at age 96. But I hope that his health is good. His mother made it past 100, and she was sharp as a tack. You look at the 2004 when Clint won for $1 Million Baby, and his mom is in attendance, and you can tell by looking at her that woman had not lost anything off her fastball, as they say. So he may never work again, or maybe if he's feeling okay, make a cameo in a Spielberg film, because he and Steven, of course, have been friends for so many years. But I hope that Clint Eastwood has a number of years of good health ahead of him to enjoy time with his family and soak in the accolades for having had such an extraordinary career, first in TV and then in movies as the matinee idol star, world's box office #1, and really one of the finest directors born in the first half of the 20th century. So I'll leave you on that belated happy birthday and best wishes to continued good health for my favorite person to ever work in the movie business, Clint Eastwood. I will see you all again real soon. I hope you have a great rest of your Monday. Peace.